I selected a verse from Shrimad Bhagavatam, Kapila Dev speaking to Devahuti in a series of verses, a series of 8 verses, Ashtakam, sometimes known as Sadhu Sangastakam, where Kapila Dev is speaking to his mother Devahuti on the process of devotional service and the benefits of Sadhu Sangha. A little background is that the verse prior to this morning's verse is how far I got with the prior sets of verses. So, who's Kapila Dev? Kapila Dev is an incarnation of the personality of Godhead. He's particularly known for his teachings in Sankhya yoga or Sankhya philosophy. And Sankhya, people look at Sankhya in different ways. Sankhya is a entryway into bhakti. Just like Krishna teaches Sankhya in Bhagavad Gita, and then he teaches bhakti. For example, in chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna begins instructing Arjuna, he speaks Sankhya. There's categories of matter, categories of spirit. You and I, we belong to the category of spirit. And then, those of you that are familiar with Bhagavad Gita, you'll know he then switches topics. He specifically says, thus far, this is to text number 37, 2.37. Krishna says, no, 39, 2.39. Krishna says, thus far I've explained Sankhya, now I'm going to explain Buddhi Yoga. Because once you understand that you belong to the category of spirit, not matter, what do? Not just hover with knowledge of who you are, but you do something with that knowledge. And the direction for doing that something comes from intelligence or buddhi. But buddhi has a purpose also. Buddhi is to direct one to service to Krishna. Come on in. Don't stay in the back. Come up front. Hi, Krishna. Thanks. So, Sankhya is a doorway into buddhi, is a doorway into bhakti. So, in one sense, they can be said, they're one thing. But there's stages or progressions to get to bhakti. They're all subsets of bhakti. Just as Krishna speaks like that in Bhagavad Gita, far more elaborately, Kapila Dev does the same thing. He teaches Sankhya, which is a doorway into buddhi, which is the gateway into bhakti. They're subsets of bhakti. Naturally, because he's an incarnation, so what's he going to speak about? The means to know him, means to know the absolute truth. The means is bhakti. It's not just Sankhya, it's not just buddhi, it's bhakti. So the background is one of the direct sons of Lord Brahma, from his own body, he generated rishis and munis and prajapatis. So one of them was Palashya. Palashya had a son named Kashyapa. So Kashyapa was instructed to assist in filling up the universe that Brahma has recently created with praja, like a Prajapati. So his reply was, yes, sir. But he didn't just go off and get married. He wanted to qualify himself to produce good praja. So what did he do? He went to the forest, because this was the very early stages of Satya Yoga, where the process of achieving perfection was dhyayate, or meditation. So he went to engage himself in meditation. But not just meditation. He was desiring not just to become qualified to have a son, as was ordered by Brahma, but he had a very particular desire. His particular desire was that he wanted the personality of Godhead as his son. Kashyapa. So he went to the forest, long meditation. Sure enough, the personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, riding on the back, standing on the back of Garuda, suddenly descended in the midst of the forest and spoke to Kashyapa. You pleased me very much. By your austerities, I know your heart's desire. You would like me as your son. The answer is yes. I'll become your son. To have me as your son, not only your heart has become purified, but you're going to require a qualified wife. And she's going to come here into the forest in 2 or 3 days. Pretty easy marriage arrangement. She is the son. So he said all this to her, to Kashyapa. She is not Kashyapa. What am I saying? Kardama Muni. So Kardama Muni was doing this meditation. Lord Vishnu appeared to him, saying she's the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu. Who's Swayambhuva Manu? Also coming directly from the body of Brahma, the first of the 14 Manus appeared, Swayambhuva Manu, and simultaneously with him, in his mature adult feature, was his mature adult wife or consort, Shatarupa. So they had a daughter, Devahuti. So Swayambhuva Manu is going to come in a couple of days, right here into the forest, and make a request of you, a Brahmana, that you marry his Kshatriya daughter, Shatarupa. Excuse me, not Shatarupa, Devahuti. What am I doing? Their daughter is Devahuti. Devahuti will be brought by Swayambhuva Manu, and all you have to do is just say yes. Normally it's not so easy, but just say yes, and she's qualified to now become your son and her son. So Swayambhuva Manu came with his daughter Devahuti. They had nice exchange. The Swayambhuva Manu, he's one of the avatars, Manvatar avatars, but he offered his respects to Kardama Muni because he's a Brahmana, and Kardama Muni offered his respects to Swayambhuva Manu because he's Manu. He's an incarnation, an avatar of Vishnu. And after that exchange, Swayambhuva Manu explained his reason for coming. Here's my daughter. Please accept her hand in marriage. And Kardama Muni said, yes, on one condition. What's that? The condition is when there's a son old enough to look after your daughter, I want to return back to the forest and continue with my process of meditation. So father was agreeable. That's a Vedic procedure. Enter into Vanaprastha after there's a son to look after my daughter. So Swayambhu, they married right there in the forest. And for tens of thousands of years, because it's a different yuga, Satya Yuga, she served him lovingly, faithfully. How did she even know about him? The answer is Narada Muni. Now, Narada Muni is a sannyasi or a renunciate, but he sometimes does matchmaking. So Narada told Devahuti, Kardama Muni, these are his qualifications. And hearing from Narada, she developed a very strong attraction to have Kardama Muni as her husband. So that's when her father asked her, do you have an idea who you'd like to marry? Kardama Muni, let's go. So now they're married, living for tens of thousands of years. Not just a Kshatriya lady, but she's a royal personality. She's used to palace life and opulence and comforts and everything. None of that. She became lean and thin, but she wasn't, unhappy. She was very happy because she was very, very qualified. She didn't mind the austerity. She was happy serving her most qualified husband. She recognized his qualification. And they lived very happily together. Then after some time, Kardama Muni said, I know that you are desiring to have a son, as am I. And for so long, we've been without having a son. So with his mystic power, Kardama Muni manifested a flying city with parks and palaces and a city that flew around, and they visited places throughout the universe, heavenly planets and here and there. So the mood changed from austerity, living in the forest, to now it's opulent life. And 9 daughters were born and 1 son. She was pregnant with 1 son. The 9 daughters, Lord Brahma came and he requested Kardama and Devahuti, please give your 9 daughters to other sons of mine. They can be wives of other Prajapatis, and they can help populate the universe that I just built. So he agreed. And then Brahma said, the child that's within the womb of Devahuti at this time is a form of the Lord. So please take good care of him. And sure enough, Kapila Dev was born as the son of Kardama and Devahuti. Particularly, it was his desire to have not only fulfill the request of Brahma, not only to fulfill the request of Brahma, but to have the Supreme Lord as his son. So Kapila Dev is an incarnation of Vishnu, who appeared as a son of Kardama Muni and Devahuti. And sure enough, after some time, Kardama Muni desired to return to the forest to continue his process of austerities and meditation, which is a little unusual because he already had the Supreme Lord as his son. What does he need to go meditate? It's a little puzzling, but that's what happened. And that left when Kapila Dev was of age to look after his mother. And then the beginning of this chapter, all of what I narrated is before chapter 25 from Canto 3. And the beginning of Canto 3, chapter 25, Devahuti speaks to her son, saying, I'm feeling great separation from my beloved husband. I've served him for tens of thousands of years and he's gone. And I'm too much materially attached. Now she's speaking as if she's a materialistic lady, but she's not. But that's how she expressed herself. Our host wants us to move around a little bit, so please comply with his request. Thank you very much. If you sit right there, then the people that come late can't get in. There we go. There we go. Thank you. So back to Devahuti, the beginning of this chapter, asks a question of her son. The question is, how do I overcome my attachment, my material attachments? Because I know the philosophy, but I'm attached. So how do I overcome it? I'm feeling too much attached. And not only because my husband is gone, but I know you're not going to stay here forever. And then what's my shelter? Help. It's her son, but she knows that her son is the personality of Godhead, so she's taking shelter for instruction, which is the right thing to do. When you're bewildered, take shelter for instruction. Then you can then at least the potential is there for you to know the right thing to do. So he gives a short answer and says, my dear mother, the solution is sadhusanga. The solution is sadhusanga. Now I'm going to step out of that topic and go to another author. Another author is Rupa Goswami that teaches there are 9 stages of bhakti. And bhakti begins when you receive bhakti from one who has bhakti. But there has to be receptacle or receiver. Supposing there's a signal. Supposing you don't have your receiver on. You're not going to hear the signal. Sadhusanga bears fruit when there's someone, a soul, that has some preliminary faith. Adau Shraddha. Adau in the beginning. Or preliminary Shraddha. And that preliminary Shraddha is very simple. There's a higher reality. There's this, and there's a higher reality. Just that. And when someone has that faith, Shraddha, Krishna, or Paramatma, or the Supreme Lord, makes an arrangement that that person who has faith can come in contact with sadhu. Those are the first 2 steps. Adau Shraddha tatak sadhu sangha. And then the 3rd step is, what do you do when you have sadhu sangha and you're a faithful person? You do with sadhus what sadhus do. That's what you do. Bhajana kriya. Bhajana kriya. Activities of bhajan or devotional service. 1, 2, 3. And then it goes further from there, up to 9. So that's what this is discussing. Devahuti has been given the association of Sadhu, more than Sadhu, he's the personality of Godhead. So she's taking shelter of Sadhu, who says the solution to your too much attached position is Sadhu Sangha. And then he says many other things, and then comes this section which I'm discussing this morning, or at least one verse from this morning, and that is this Sadhu Sangastika. So these 8 starts with the definition of sadhu. Well, what are the lakshana or characteristics of a sadhu? And then when you have sadhu sangha, what do you do? Bhajana kriya. And then when you do bhajana kriya, what happens? What's the sequence of events that happen? So all of this is a background to give you a picture of. I've been speaking in different places that I've been visiting on this series, and now we're up to number 26. And the translation for number 26 starts with thus. So 26 connects with 25. So I'm going to read the translation of 25, and then we'll chant together 26 and read the verse and purport. The translation for text 25. It's a very nice verse. 3:25:25. It's a good one to learn and become familiar with. What happens in the association of sadhus? In the association of sadhus, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No Krishna Katha or Hari Katha. That's what you do when you're with sadhus. Same as what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Same as what Krishna says. Kathayantas chamam nityam tushanti cha ramanti cha. Same. That's what you do when you're with sadhus. What do they do? They discuss topics about Hari. So you hear topics of Hari when you're with sadhus. And it's very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and to the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed. That was pretty quick, but it's just giving not a timeline, but a chronology. So let's do the chronology again. Some preliminary faith, association with a sadhu. What's the characteristics of a sadhu? When you're with that sadhu, what do you do? And what's the fruit of what you do when you do things with a sadhu? So you hear, it's pleasing to the ear and to the heart. Knowledge awakens. Knowledge, transcendental knowledge is already there. You know how to hook up to Zoom. It's not already in your heart. But that's okay. You can use it in Krishna service. But there's another kind of knowledge besides technology, and that's what's already there. And that which is already there becomes awakened by what? By topics in relation to Hari. Two things happen. By hearing topics in relation to Hari, coverings, ignorance is removed. Gradually, ignorance is removed. And when ignorance is removed, what's left? Knowledge. Because ignorance is covering knowledge. You remove the ignorance and knowledge awakens. So by cultivation of such knowledge, what happens next? Gradually one becomes advanced on the path of liberation. You're not liberated yet, but gradually one becomes advanced on the path of liberation. And thereafter, he is freed. Freed from what? Cycle of birth and death, the bondage that is caused by ignorance. When knowledge is awakened. And it's not just freed from ignorance, then you do what a liberated soul does. What does a liberated soul do? Serve the Supreme. Muktir hitvanyata rupam svarupena vyavastati. It's a nice verse Prabhupada referred to so many times. What is mukti, or liberation? Good question. It's not just you cease material existence and you twinkle. Muktir hitvanyata rupam svarupena, svarupa, your spiritual form becomes revealed, svarup, and in that spiritual form you use your spiritual senses to serve the master of the senses. That's what you do. Devotional service. Rishikena, Rishikesha, Sevanam, Bhaktir. That's what real mukti is, according to the statements of in Srimad Bhagavatam. I like Srimad Bhagavatam. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's 2 places where it says there's 10 topics in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and one of them is mukti. So what's the definition of mukti? Muktir hitvanyata rupam svarupena vyavastati. You let go of the material, you don't have to give up your body, you let go of the material conception that I'm this body. Well, you have a body. And you engage your senses in the service of the master of the senses, with your spiritual senses. Even while you have this physical body, the spiritual body is within. Spiritual form is there. And it awakens, that spiritual form awakens and becomes matured by the primary activity of hearing. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. It's just that. So that's what mukti is. So gradually, knowledge is cultivated. Detachment is a byproduct of knowledge. And one moves forward on the path of liberation. And thereafter, he's freed. And his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin. So all of that other before is preliminary. That's where we are. It's not like we're not doing devotional service if we're just doing practice. Here's a really easy example to understand. Multiple choice question. A tulsi is A seed, or B, the little sprout that comes after you germinate the tulsi seed, or C, a tulsi is when the first 2 leaves unfurl as it comes shooting out of the earth. And then D, a tulsi is where there's many, many leaves, tulsi manjaris, and more seeds. That's a tulsi. Or finally, all of the above. It's all of the above. It's just different stages of the same. And the mature is when more seeds are produced, but there's in between the mature and the seed. So even when there's just the seed. So what's the seed? Very simple. The seed is an attraction for hearing topics of transcendence, or Hari. Attraction. So here we are, gathered, hearing topics of Hari from an incarnation of Hari. So real devotional service begins means that's the mature stage. But it's not that it wasn't real devotional service before the mature stage. It's sadhana is a practice, And the mature fruit of sadhana is sadhya, the mature stage. And then in the mature stage, there's coverings are gone. No mix of involvement in the modes of nature, which leads us to the next verse, which is on the screen here. Yeah. So those of you that like to recite Sanskrit verses can recite after me. We'll do it responsively. Bhaktya pumanjata viraga aindriyad dushta sutanmad rachana nuchintaya Chitasya yato grahane yoga yukto yatishyate vrijubhir yoga margai. Translation. Thus, consciously engage in devotional service, in association of devotees, a person gains distaste for sense gratification both in this world and in the next by constantly thinking about the activities of the Lord. This process of Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of mystic power. When one is actually situated on that path of devotional service, he is able to control the mind. So the control of the mind is gradual, just as the rising of the sun is gradual. When light comes from the rising of the sun, darkness is dispelled. The mind that's agitated, disturbed, and distracted is part of darkness. But when light comes on, it becomes stronger, then naturally the mind becomes controlled or attracted. Controlled means attracted to topics about Krishna. Same as the message of Bhagavad Gita. There's no accident. What's in the Bhagavatam is the same as the message of Bhagavad Gita. It's just expanded. For example, this is one. Chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is speaking also about renunciation, and he says, what is called renunciation is the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme, because no one can become renounced without linking with the Supreme. So when you become linked with the Supreme, the mind becomes controlled. Conversely, if you're not linked with the Supreme, you're not going to have a mind that's controlled. It can be more controlled than somebody else, or less controlled than somebody else, but it's not going to be controlled. Say it positively. When thought of the Supreme, who is so attractive, is what is being carried in the heart and in the mind, then the mind is controlled. The mind is controlled means, even if there's some, this is important, even if there's some disturbance, the mind doesn't become disturbed. What's that? Disturbance means you're disturbed. Is there such a thing that some disturbance comes and you're undisturbed? Yes. It's called yoga. You'll do it again. One who is a yogi remains undisturbed, even when there's cause for disturbance. This is just sharing for those of you that came a little later. Yesterday evening, we had a gathering at a high school gymnasium, and it was a Janmashtami function. And there were a lot of people. Pious people. And some of those pious people were devotees. And some of the pious people were just pious people. And pious people do what pious people do. They enjoy the company of other pious people, and the children are playing with other pious children, doing pious child play and screaming and running around and, doing things that children like to do together. And maybe 80% of the people in attendance were in the pious people category. It was quite distracting for the people that wanted to hear and the one who wanted to be able to have them hear. It was distracting. But it takes really being a fixed yogi to be able to not be distracted when there's cause of distraction. A teenager 2 days ago wrote to me, I won't say which temple, teenager a few days ago, just the day after Janmashtami, they wrote, they sat in the side of the room and they were watching that 2,400 people poured in and out of the temple, of their local temple. And they were just noticing that there are some people that are just pious and they're there not paying any attention to anything other than they're there for pious purposes. They're very respectful before the altar and the deity, and otherwise they're just having conversation with their kids and the kids running around. Same thing as yesterday evening. And then there were some people that were really devotional. So she was thinking about herself. I used to be like that. I grew up in a pious family, and I've somehow made a transition from being just a young teenager in a pious family to a committed devotee. I was like that. But how did I move from that to now becoming a devotee, a Vaishnava, a genuine Vaishnava, not just a pious person in a pious family? It's sadhu sangha. In other words, she was sharing, I really appreciate the gift that I've been given. Now, hearing that from a teenager was like, wow. Because some teenagers are not so introspective about the gift that they've received. But this young girl was, and feeling very grateful of the many, 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 many interactions and persons and classes and teachers and teachings and kindness, and because it takes a lot to go from being a pious to a very committed and undisturbed Vaishnava, devotee of the Lord. There's nothing, and there's nothing. The Adar Shraddha is the first step, and I was thinking about that, yesterday evening, because 2 days before that came this letter from a teenager, and I was like that. So many of these people are like that. But if they really receive sadhu sangha in a genuine way, then they can move from being just pious. Nothing wrong with being pious. One should be pious. Mode of goodness is good. But mode of goodness isn't transcendence. How do you get to transcendence from the mode of goodness? Sadhu sangha. I mean, that's the topic. But the practical application of this topic is not just a textbook message. It's life. Today. In the world in which we live. Lots of people are not pious. There are some people that are pious. And of those people that are pious, the very fortunate ones, Krishna says it in Bhagavad Gita, the very fortunate ones, Manushanam sahasreshu kastyadyatati siddhaye. Hardly one is going to strive for siddha. And of those who achieve siddha, hardly one knows me in truth. It's right from Bhagavad Gita. So what's the goal? To know Krishna. It's right in Bhagavad Gita. And how can you know Krishna? By the method of bhakti. Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavanyascha. So how does bhakti arise? If that's the way to know Krishna, that's the the destination you should put in your GPS. That's the destination. How do you get there? You have to have a good GPS. You have to know the destination. And you need sadhusanga. They can tell you, don't turn left, turn right. Or keep going straight, or whatever and then you just follow your GPS. Of course, it's not just a machine. There's a relationship with those who are representatives of Krishna. That's what this young teenage girl was sharing, feeling very grateful. So we can also become like that, any one of us, at any age, at any stage of life, and become more than a pious person. So I'm going to read the purport, and then we're going to see if there have some discussion. In all scriptures, people are encouraged to act in a pious way so that they can enjoy sense gratification not only in this life but also in the next. The Vedas encourage like that. For example, one is promised promotion to the heavenly kingdom of higher planets by pious fruitive activities. But a devotee in the association of devotees prefers to contemplate the activities of the Lord, how he has created this universe, how he is maintaining it, how the creation dissolves, and how in the spiritual kingdom of the Lord's pastimes are going on. There are full literatures describing these activities of the Lord, especially Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Samhita, and Srimad Bhagavatam. The sincere devotee who associates with devotees, same, Adar Shraddha Sadhusanga, same couplet. The sincere devotee who associates with devotees gets the opportunity to hear and contemplate this subject of the pastimes of the Lord. And the result is that he feels distaste for the so-called happiness of this or that world in heaven or on other planets. The devotees are simply interested in being transferred to the personal association of the Lord, semicolon. They have no more attraction for temporary so-called happiness. That is the position of one who is yoga yukta. Yoga yukta is right in the Sanskrit of the verse, yoga yukta. A very suitable word used here is rijabir, or very easy. There are different processes of yoga marg, attaining the yoga perfection, but this process, devotional service to the Lord, is the easiest. Not only is it the easiest process, but the result is sublime. Everyone, therefore, should try to take up this process of Krishna consciousness and reach the highest perfection of life. Now that's Prabhupada's purport, but the verse itself is the scriptural foundation for the writings of Rupa Goswami, where he also sequentially identifies the stages of bhakti. And those who are bhaktas, or sadhus, or devotees of the Lord, their business is three things. Very simple. Hear and try to assimilate what one has heard. 2, apply sincerely as far as one can that which one has heard. And then 3, to share your realizations and experiences with others. And that's our life. Very simple. And then there's some details here of, getting on the path of liberation and experiencing a pleasure in the ears and in the heart. And step by step, as the path of liberation is traversed, the affinity for the temporary diminishes and drops gradually, and the affinity for transcendence, hearing, remembering, discussing the Supreme Lord and his activities and loving dealings grows. So one's consciousness becomes absorbed in transcendence. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam jajatante kalevaram. What you think of at the time of leaving this body is where you go. Quite simple. Whatever the mind is absorbed in at that moment when the soul leaves the body, that's where you go. That means the subtle body, starting with the mind, carries the soul to its next destination. So if practice, the mind becomes absorbed in thought of Krishna, that's where you go. And if you do it 10%, then it's 10%. If you do it 50%, it's 50%. So destination is determined by what the mind is absorbed in. Therefore, yoga is very much involved in mindfulness of what? So there can be mindfulness of heavenly pleasures, or mindfulness of just getting an upgrade in this lifetime with more objects for enjoyment, more facilities that come from piety in this life or the next, or with sadhu sangha, then the opportunity to have that diminished and increased is Harikatha. And then engaging oneself in relation to Hari as a way of life. Doesn't it? So I'll end with this. I've given some references from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Here's one from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Then I promise I'll end. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya met with a very elevated governor of Chennai. At that time it was Madras. The governor. Or when Prabhupada wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita, it was Madras. So he was under the supervision, he was the governor under the king. The kingdom of that particular king had vast territory. But his capital was near Puri. Anyway, so Lord Chaitanya met Ramananda Roy, who was the governor of Madras. And he was most elevated Vaishnav. They met in the evening, and Lord Chaitanya, being a sannyasi, asked this Kshatriya, what's the goal of life and the means to achieve it? A sannyasi is asking a grahastha, a Kshatriya grahastha, what's the goal of life? Not like he was giving him an exam, he wanted to hear from him. So he gave many, many scriptures, and finally the scripture in Lord Chaitanya said, that's nice, but go further, that's nice, go further, that's nice, go further. Finally, Lord Chaitanya accepted the following verse. That's a prayer from Lord Brahma to Krishna, and that in the occasion of the stealing of the calves and the cowherd boys and putting them in a cave and all that. So stane statak is how it starts. Stane statak means stay in your position. You have to give up your position. Stay in your position. Okay, I'll stay in my position. No problem. Now what should I do? Shrutika tam tanavan manobir. You should, same message as this one, as Kapila is giving to Devahuti. hear topics of transcendence from the right source, from sadhus. And when you hear same sequence, the attraction for the temporary diminishes and eventually disappears, and one's absorption becomes absorbed in transcendence, the personality of Godhead. The goal of life and the means to achieve it was the question. The goal of life and the means to achieve it. So that's what the Bhagavatam is giving us, and that's what Lord Chaitanya was saying to Ramananda Roy. Goal of life and the means to achieve it. You don't have to give something up. Your career, your occupation, family, or something. There's some who say you can't make any progress until you renounce the world. That's not what Bhagavatam says. That's not what Lord Chaitanya says. So you don't have to renounce the world. You have to renounce stuff. Because real renunciation is attachment to the Supreme. Become attached to the Supreme. Stay in your position. Hear topics of transcendence from the right sources. And your attention will go to transcendence. Your attention will go to those topics. Krishna Katha, Hari Katha, Bhagavat Katha. And it's exactly what is being expressed here by Kapila Dev to his mother. Too much attachment? Here's the remedy. Sadhu Sangha. Any discussion? Nice topic, huh?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I have a question from yesterday's lecture.
Yesterday, okay.
So you spoke
you
about...
wrote it down.
Sorry?
You took notes from yesterday?
I just had a question, so I wrote it down.
Okay.
So yesterday you spoke about how there was a Purusha incarnation of Krishna and Balaram, which went into Devaki and Rohini, respectively.
Yes.
And then after that, then Krishna and Balaram, like the
original feature from the spiritual sky appeared.
They came down and they also went into Devaki.
They entered into the same womb.
Yeah. So I've had this question asked to me multiple times by multiple friends.
Really?
Yeah. They're Indians, so they ask, like, Vishnu is the original one, not Krishna. Krishna is an incarnation. But I think, if I'm not wrong, Krishna is the original one. Vishnu is one of his many incarnations.
I get the question. I find it interesting that your friends are asking you that question. It's nice that they know that much and they're asking that question. I'm appreciating them, and somehow they got trained in such a way to ask such a question. So there are different ways to answer. Here's one. You can take them through verse by verse, Canto 1, Chapter 3. Canto 1, Chapter 3 is an answer to one of the 6 questions that comes in Canto 1, Chapter 1. One of those 6 questions is, please describe the forms of the Lord as they appear in this world, or avatars. The first in the list of the avatars is the Purusha avatars. Who are the Purusha avatars? Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Kshirodakshay Vishnu. And they're outlined, and then the purports give details. So they're forms of the Lord that appear in this world. They have a function, material creation. They don't directly contact matter, but they oversee the affairs of material creation. That's what the Purusha avatars do. They're forms of the Lord that appear in this world. And then there's another list of different categories of avatars from the Purusha avatars, starting with Manvantar avatars, the Manus, Leela avatars, the celebrated Das avatar, but there's more than 10, Guna avatars, Shaktiavesh avatars, and avatars. There's a list. And then, pause, there's a very important verse that I put on the screen yesterday, 1.3.28, where Sutta Goswami says, out of this list of avatars, one amongst them is the source of all the avatars, or the avatari, including the Purusha avatars. Now, in the list of Purusha avatars, let's go back, and in that list of Purusha incarnations from the Purusha avatars, Krishna and Balaram are mentioned. So it's correct to say, in one sense, Krishna and Balaram, all the other Leela avatars, they're avatars of Vishnu. That's correct. And amongst those avatars of Vishnu, what is the source of all the avatars, including Vishnu Purusha avatars? I'll say it again. There's more than one, but that's a really nice one. So, you're not just talking off the top of your head. There's authority for what you're saying. So 1.3.28 gives the answer. What are the avatars? First in the list, Purusha avatars. Because from the Purusha avatars, all the other avatars are manifest in this world. Krishna and Balaram are in the list, and many others are in the list. It's a nice list. It's not a complete list, but it's a nice list. And then, of all these avatars of Vishnu, what is the source of all the avatars, including Vishnu? Avatari. So, wait a minute, your friends might say. How can this be correct and that's also correct? It seems like a contradiction. Because I was trained from when I was a little girl that Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu. And your book says Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu. So there. But now you're saying there's this verse that says Krishna is the source of all the avatars, including Vishnu. So that's a contradiction, sounds like. So if that question arises, it may not. But if it arises, it would benefit you to become familiar with what our acharyas have to say about that verse, because what our acharyas say is, out of the 18,000 verses in the Bhagavatam, I mentioned it last night, this one is Paribhasa Sutra. It's the verse upon which all the other 17,999 verses rest. It's the root from which all other branches and sprouts and everything come. What's that? Krishna's a source. And then if you can become familiar with what the acharyas say, but you can then also go to Bhagavad Gita in two places, at least. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, text number 10. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pravartate. When Krishna says, I'm the source of everything. From me, everything comes, forwards and backwards. I'm the source of everything. Everything comes from me. And part of everything is the Purusha avatars, matter and spirit. He's the source of everything. Or, matak parataram nanyat kim chedasti nanjaya. Another verse in Bhagavad Gita. There's no truth superior to me. And truth in the Vedic sense means the source. There's no truth superior to me. Mata parataram nanya na anya. There isn't another tattva or truth superior to me. He's the source of everything, or he is the source of everything, or he's the source of everything. Now, to help them understand, you can say like this. There are different ways. We're sitting in the living room here. How did we get here? We came through the front door. Did we exist before we came through the front door? Of course. We don't just start to exist when we came through the front door. So, similarly, Krishna appeared as an avatar Vishnu, but he existed before he came as an avatar Vishnu. And he came through the Vishnu portal. He appeared that way. But he existed before everything existed. And he's the source of everything. That's how you understand. He's simultaneously an avatar of Vishnu and the source of all avatars. He came into the world that way.
Thank you, Maharaj.
No, depending upon the person you're speaking to, there may be many different reactions. But at least so that you're satisfied, I'm not just talking. There's scriptural authority, and it's very reasonable. The authority is very reasonable. And if someone doesn't want to accept it, that's okay. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Bhagavan Swayam. Swayam Bhagavan is the original source of everything. Krishna. Interesting question from yesterday evening. Anything else? You have something.
Maharaj, you touched upon a very, very important point through this this lecture, where the entry point to devotional life is through sadhu sangha, which is coming through the hearing process, and just remaining pious is not good enough.
It's
You
good.
have to.
Good is good.
So now in today's world, there are, even when it comes to hearing, the YouTube is just proliferated with so many varieties of topics, so many varieties of speakers, and when you open the YouTube, just you can search on anything and you can get anybody speak on any topic. So what would be some guidelines in making our hearing process more robust, more effective?
Several things are popping into my mind, and I'm just selecting from the menu. One principle is disciplic succession. One should hear from disciplic succession because that's the right source to hear from. How do we know that? Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, hear through disciplic succession. And that means not otherwise. Do this means don't do that. So hear through disciplic succession. Because Krishna says, if not, then knowledge is lost. So you're hearing gobbledygook instead of knowledge in disciplic succession. Second, it's good to hear from in disciplic succession from a source that you have some faith in, or a person. You start hearing from multiple persons, it can also become confusing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but if one becomes accustomed to going here, going there, going here, going there, you're going to hear things that are expressed in a different way, or maybe even understandings that are different from that understanding. So it's good, as far as possible, to hear from a reliable source that's in disciplic succession before proliferating sources that you hear from. That means it's good to be discriminating. Then there's a third, that is things that you hear. What's the scriptural authority behind the things that you hear? And if you don't know, it's good to know. It's good to ask if you hear, and what's the scriptural authority behind this? So that's it's another qualifier of how you discern from where do you hear. When you hear something, best that there's the person that you hear from, you can ask, where does this come from? Where does that come from? What's the scriptural authority behind this or that? Just like her question. And those three things that I mentioned, it's not exclusivism, but it's discernment, or being discriminating about where I hear from. So I don't get unnecessarily confused. And then a person, this is connected to those three, or maybe as a fourth one, but a person who I go to, a person that's accessible to me, that I can go to and ask particular questions like this one. I heard this. I heard that. How do I decide between this and that? And in some cases, they're not contradictory. I was thinking just this morning, because I was looking at the books on your bookshelf there, and one of the books on your bookshelf is Vedic Cosmology. Just a little sharing. Some years ago, I was at Stanford University, and I was teaching a seminar on Mysteries of the Sacred Universe, which was a whole presentation on Sadaputa's explanation of 5th Canto Bhagavatam, which is, very complicated. So one of the things that I discussed at Stanford University was the Vedic model is geocentric, and Copernicus's model is heliocentric. And both are valid, at least in terms of math, because you can predict astronomical events are going to take place long before they happen. It's just relative motion. They're moving around the sun, they're moving around the earth. It's relativity. And I showed them, in using graphics, how it can work, how it can be explained. And you just have a different equation. You put in the numbers in the equation, and you get the same result. Like, when's the next solar eclipse? Vedic cosmology and Western Copernicus heliocentric model can predict when's the next solar eclipse very accurately. So both are just fine, just relative motion. So there was a student that asked a question. Wait a minute. Which is it? And I said, they're both right. He said, no. Is it this or is it that? And it wasn't a showstopper. He was just being, a college kid. If it's this, it can't be that. If it's that, it can't be this. It's one or the other. Which is it? So it's relative motion. Different ways of describing it. The Vedic model, I can stand up and say the Vedic model is right. And then somebody else that espouses, the modern astronomical model, they'll say, no, this is right. And here's proof. Da-da-da-da-da-da. We can predict events before they happen. So it works. It's an accurate model. And therefore it's the model. So you have to have a source that you can go to when you hear different things. How do you sort it out? And it can be either this or that, or it can be both. Those are 4. Anything else? How about our host? You've been listening very carefully. Our hostess is going to answer instead of the host.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
You mentioned Sadhu Sangha. Sadhu Sangha.
Sadhu Sangha, yes, I did.
So you need enough good fortune or pious activity to get Sadhu Sangha.
Who is fortunate? Well, even unfortunate people can become fortunate by Sadhu Sangha. It's not a prerequisite. You don't have to be pious to hear from sadhu and benefit. Let me ask you, take your question and turn it around the other way. Supposing you want a fire. Which is going to work better? Dry leaves or wet leaves? Or dry wood or wet wood?
Wet lips.
Wet wood is going to work
fire.
better.
Yeah.
Dry wood is going to be better.
Yes. Yeah.
But supposing you have wet wood, you don't have dry wood. Does that mean you can't have a fire? No. You take the wet wood, put it near the fire, and it gets dry, and then it can make a fire. So when Prabhupada came to America, did he deal with pious people or impious people? No question.
No question.
But they became pious by sadhu sangha, and then they ignited.
So that is their good fortune? They
Of
got
course,
Prabhupada?
yes. Transcendental good fortune, not mode of goodness good fortune. Bhakti is awakened by contact with bhakti, or one who is carrying bhakti. That's how it's awakened.
And
The coverings can be according to the modes of nature. Coverings are according to the modes of nature. For a mode of goodness person, it's easier. However, you want to hear something that's a problem? Supposing somebody's in the mode of goodness, they may be attached. Commonly, persons in the mode of goodness are attached to the fruits that come from their piety and being enjoyers of the fruits of their piety. And for such persons, it's more difficult to ignite.
Hare Krishna.
You follow what I just said? You got a little distracted. Should I say it again? You got it?
Yes, I got it, Maharaj.
Okay. Therefore,
Maharaj, how we will get transcendental good fortune? Only by hearing?
well, that's how it starts. That's how it starts.
But you
So
need...
supposing you don't hear, you just see. There's good fortune. Supposing, for example, persons saw Srila Prabhupada. They didn't hear him speaking or chanting or making sound. They just saw him. Good fortune? Yes.
Good fortune.
And then it can amplify or magnify good fortune.
And Maharaj, how we will grow the taste of hearing?
By cleaning. Cheto darpana marjanam, cleansing the mind. And how do you do that? The sound. Best. Okay. Spiritual sound. And where does spiritual sound come from? From those that are carrying spiritual sound. Those who have received spiritual sound can vibrate spiritual sound. Shravanam Kirtanam. You can do, because you've heard.
Hare Krishna.
You're
Hare
smiling.
Krishna.
There may be some further purification, but you can still make spiritual sound. Kirtan, repeating what you've heard, reciting slokas, etc. Shravanam Kirtanam. Anything else?